Yeah, so this is an exclusive that just dropped on Insider Gaming. It's about Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Lord of the Rings, that's heavily underutilized in the gaming space. We did have some good games dropping a couple of years back with the Shadow of Mordor, the Mordor games. Those were really good. But then we also got some interesting games instead in the Lord of the Rings universe. And I'll get to that in a minute. But this is an exclusive one, new Lord of the Ring game, apparently in development. And I think we should talk about it. And this is what they say. A brand new Lord of the Rings game is in development and has been for some time. Sources close to the game tell Insider Gaming that a new title is said to be at least partially funded by Abu Dhabi Investment Office, or ADIO. This funding should roughly equate to 100 million, give or take. So just to not be confused, Abu Dhabi Investment Office is another entity that is separate from Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, which has been involved with the buyout with EA and the Ubisoft Mirage, Assassin's Creed Mirage DLC, etc. This is a separate thing. This is Abu Dhabi that is trying to expand their reach into the gaming industry, I suppose. So they're funding this new Lord of the Rings game. Interesting. The deal has been in the works since last year, and while not signed yet due to the number of moving parts, it's set to be made official soon and could happen as early as next week. Regarding current funding of the game's development, it has been funded internally. As far as what the game will be, sources didn't want to say too much. What was said, however, is that it will be a third-person action game that is designed in a way to compete with Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy? That is an interesting choice. Multiple parties are involved with the game, including Embracer Revenge and other studios. Embracer has had the rights to the Lord of the Rings IP for video games since 2022. When it paid nearly 400 million. It has since licensed out those rights to other companies to produce titles, including the much maligned The Lord of the Rings Gollum. Lord of the Rings Gollum is the last fully fleshed Lord of the Rings game. And I don't know whose ideas it was to think that this was a good idea to make a game out of. So Lord of the Rings Gollum, yeah, 6 out of 10, 4 out of 10, 2 out of 10. 6 out of 10 on Steam is pretty freaking generous, man. This game sucked. This is what Gollum looked like. This actually makes it look like it's like a good looking game, but it wasn't. Like, it really wasn't. This is what Embracer Games, ever since acquiring the rights to Lord of the Rings franchise, has been able to put out. This was a really bad game. You just basically play as Gollum and like trying to escape a cave for most of the game. And you're like doing these stealth bits and stuff. I just don't understand who thought, okay, imagine Lord of the Rings where you play as Gollum, this little creature who is mostly defenseless, trying to get around. He's basically a rat in a cave. That's essentially what this game is. And someone thought, a whole group of people thought that this was a good idea. And this game not only played bad, it looked bad too. And it was very poorly optimized. And it was a hot mess. Somehow, well, this is what Embracer Group had managed to put out. I do have my concerns with this piece of news with them. I know, like, you know, all these other people are behind it with ADIO funding this game. But the fact that, you know, they're trying to make a game that's going to compete with Hogwarts Legacy, I mean, that might be a bit of a stretch. When they announced Hogwarts Legacy, I was skeptical as well, because it was made by, back then, relatively unknown studio, Avalanche Software. So just not to be confused with Avalanche Studios, that's a whole separate studio. Avalanche Software is the studio behind Hogwarts Legacy. Before they made Hogwarts Legacy, do you know what the game they made before Hogwarts Legacy? It's a little game called Cars 3 Driven to Win. It's this game.
Buckle up for the ride of your life.
So this is the game Avalanche Software made prior to start working on Hogwarts Legacy. Not to be confused with Avalanche Studios, like I said. These are totally different companies. Avalanche Studios is a completely separate group of developers that make games like Just Cause, Mad Max, Rage. So they are different. This is Avalanche Software. And their portfolio consists of, well, they did work on Mortal Kombat trilogy, but then they have moved on to make all these like NFL, NBA games. And then eventually their latest work has always been just Disney properties, mostly. Disney's Chicken Little action adventure game, Dragon Ball Z apparently. Hannah Montana, they made Hannah Montana apparently. And then Bolt, which is, a movie tie-in game. Toy Story 3 movie tie-in. So they worked on Disney Infinity. Disney Infinity, for those who don't know, pretty big game back in the day. It had like these toys attached to it, like buy, and then it activate and unlocks characters in game, and they are all like Disney characters, like Disney's IP. So like as you can see, you got Pirates of the Caribbean, Monsters Inc., everybody, like Toy Story, all the Disney properties. And it was pretty cool. As you can see here, even Marvel characters are part of it because, Marvel is owned by Disney. Yeah, so they worked on Disney Infinity 2.0, 3.0, and Star Wars, yeah. And then eventually Cars 3 Driven to Win in 2017. And then they dropped Hogwarts Legacy, dude. And obviously, this is why I was pretty skeptical. But they more than proved themselves with that game. That game, Hogwarts Legacy, was amazing. It's a pretty amazing game, and they actually proved themselves to be a force to be reckoned with. And now they're already working on Hogwarts Legacy 2. And now I have no doubt they're going to be able to pull it off, right? No issue. Because they have been able to prove themselves, which I must say doesn't happen quite often. It is the exception, right? It's not something that happens with every studio that's been like working on these little projects, and then all of a sudden they get given a big massive IP, and then they manage to somehow prove themselves in a big way. It doesn't happen often. Revenge and other studios are working on this IP for Lord of the Rings, right? Revenge Studios? I don't know who they are. This might be that one. RG, where our mission is to transform online gaming by creating visually stunning, mathematically innovative experiences that connect. Okay. Industry, computer games, 11 to 50 employees, Bangalore. So they're based in India. Can't find anything much to do with Revenge Game Studios. Interesting name. Revenge Games. Is that? I can't seem to find a lot about who this Revenge Studios is. It seems like it's a fairly young company. That also adds to the whole concern about whether or not they'll be able to pull off something like a third-person action adventure game to compete with the likes of Hogwarts Legacy, right? When they say third-person action adventure game, I believe they're trying to do something similar to what Shadow of Mordor did. It looks that way, which is the right way to go if you're making a game set in this world. But whether or not they can compete with a game like Hogwarts Legacy, that's yet to be seen. And rightfully so, because what Embracer thought was a fine game with this IP was Lord of the Rings Gollum. They thought it was a fine enough game to release into the public. So it doesn't give me a lot of confidence as to what they think is good when it comes to this IP, When contacted for a statement, Embracer says that as a general rule, we do not comment on rumors or speculation. Revenge, one studio said to be involved with the game, also declined to comment on rumor and speculation. I think that kind of pretty much tells you all you need to know when it comes to whether or not they're working on this. I think it's pretty likely that they're working on it. If they don't want to make a comment on it, if they weren't working on it, they would have just said so. So the fact that they didn't comment on rumor or speculation, I think it's pretty likely they're working on something to do with Lord of the Rings. Third-person action game is the way to go, I think. It is the right way to go, but it doesn't mean shit if the game is still going to be bad. Gollum was a third-person action adventure game, and it was pretty shit. But on the other hand, we had Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. Those games are pretty awesome. They were also third-person action adventure games set in the Lord of the Rings universe. What we haven't had is something that captures the magic of the Lord of the Rings universe. So I think it is interesting that they did say they're trying to compete with something like Hogwarts Legacy, which I think did an amazing job at capturing the feel and the magic of that Harry Potter universe, and like you living out the fantasy of, you know, being a student at Hogwarts. And I think it did a pretty phenomenal job with the sound design, the gameplay, everything. I mean, Hogwarts is not a perfect game. It had a lot of issues, but for a studio like Avalanche Software to come from making games like Cars 3, Disney Infinity, and to have made a game in the caliber of Hogwarts Legacy, I think that was pretty impressive. It wasn't without shortcomings, but it was a pretty good game and a pretty fun time too. I think it's interesting that these guys are comparing that what they're doing to Hogwarts Legacy, because it tells me they're trying to tap into that, just living out that fantasy kind of thing. But I don't know how they're gonna execute that. It still remains to be seen. Yeah, I guess we'll see how it goes. As of right now, with this information, the amount of information we have, which is not much, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence as to where this will go. It's right now a bunch of people are making this game, and if what we found is true, it's a fairly small studio, Revenge Game Studio, set in India, Bangalore. I could not find anything which tells me it's a fairly new studio. Doesn't give me a lot of confidence. We'll see. I don't want to make a judgment just yet, but like, I'm not trying to be cynical. I'm being skeptical until I see results, right? So we'll see how it goes. We'll see as the time goes. We'll get more details. We'll probably see gameplay, and then we can decide whether or not it's actually good. So up until then, we'll see. We will see. Let me know what you guys think of this Lord of the Rings game development. If you have any thoughts on that, let me know in the comments below. Yeah.